I'm ConjuredJasper. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching another one of my paranormal stories. I have 3 today. They are all true. I have a day in my life vlog coming out this Tuesday if you would like to watch it. Also, this is all of my social media if you would like to subscribe to any of it. Let's get into these stories. This first story comes from user Scara-Meowie. I think something is haunting my home. A few weeks ago, my dad left to go to work in Mindano. I was excited since he was going to bring gifts such as food and toys. A week or 2 later, perhaps in the afternoon, I heard a familiar voice. It was my dad, and my mom was talking to him. I sighed and focused on my iPad. A few minutes later, my dad knocked on the door. When I opened it, I saw him. He wore a gray shirt. Why am I mentioning this? This is important later. Me and my dad hugged each other and talked for a bit. I don't remember much about the conversation, but I remember him saying, "Tomorrow, I'll show you something." He was acting really weird, but he's a weird guy, so I don't mind it. After that, I went to sleep. A few hours later, I woke up in the middle of the night. I was a bit dizzy, so I went to get a glass of water. When I checked my parents' room, I saw that it was only my mom in there. I asked, "Ma, where's Dad? Did he leave?" "What? Your dad is still in Mindano," Mom replied. I was flabbergasted. If Dad was still in Mindano, then who the f did I hug? I explained to my mom about what happened and that I literally heard her talking to Dad, but she denied it. Next morning, I talked to my mom about going to the mall. Mom was feeling unwell, so she said that Dad can let me go when he comes back. That's when a memory of what happened last night flooded in. I told her what happened again, and she was as shocked as me. Then she called my dad, explaining what I told him. I started freaking out when he said he was wearing a gray shirt the day before. A few weeks later, and I somewhat forgot about the experience. My mom walked up to me and asked if I went to their bedroom and opened the closet. I said no, and she said that she saw someone opening the closet. She didn't mind it since she thought it was me, and obviously it wasn't. I stayed up all night so my friend who was living with me didn't leave the room. I didn't leave either since I was too busy watching TikTok. Dad thinks someone is haunting this area. I don't think the house is haunted since no one died in it. Plus, my dad built it. My theory is an Encanto is toying with us. Encantos are deities or nature spirits that Filipinos used to worship and respect during the pre-colonial time. Although this theory could be easily disproven, perhaps a gust of wind could open the closet. The only question I have is who the f did I hug a few weeks ago? If it's not my father, then who is it? That's such an odd story because I hate it when spirits act as like people. And this one is about Ouija boards, and it comes from user NoMountain9832. Why I don't play with Ouija boards anymore. There will be 2 stories here. The first one's super creepy, and the second more sad / more of an explanation to why I no longer participate. I want to preface this all by saying I grew up seeing ghosts, so the whole topic of spirits wasn't new to me. However, I was so scared by them that around the time I was around 7 or 8, when the energetic system starts to be solely individualized, I trained my brain not to see them anymore. I never talked about it with friends as my family never believed me, so I assumed they wouldn't either. The first story takes us back to the 2000s. I was a little girl celebrating my friend's birthday. She always had a Halloween party to celebrate because that's when her birthday happened to be. She always talked about how her basement felt weird and she didn't like staying down there alone. While having 10 or so 10-year-old girls sleep over on Halloween night isn't exactly bedroom material, so her mom and grandma set us up in the basement. There we played those weird games like light as a feather, stiff as a board, and stuff. Fun fact, I was the only one we successfully levitated. I remember opening my eyes and I was damn near the ceiling. It was spooky. When some of us started to get tired, we brought out the Ouija board. A few of our friends were spooked, so they didn't want to participate. We asked innocent questions like kids usually do. Who is the birthday girl gonna marry? How old are we gonna be when we have kids? Stuff like that. I remember I asked a question about myself and it replied dead, which was weird. Some of the girls got spooked even more by that. Then a girl screamed and said she saw something behind me in the mirror. We stopped after that. For a few hours, 3 of us, including me and the birthday girl, couldn't sleep. We weren't sure if the board was real or not, so we decided we'd try it one more time while everyone else was asleep. Thinking that since they didn't want to play, it'd be better that way. We were close to 3 a.m. What we heard is the witching hour. Remember here that we were about 10 or 11 years old, dumb, and I had no idea what we were doing or who we were talking to. We asked the board if it could do something for us. We said at 3:15 a.m. to have the girl who saw something in the mirror wake up and say something to us. It was over 15 years ago, so I don't remember what we asked for this girl to say. All I know is we asked for her to look into the mirror and say it. 3:15 a.m. was about 20 or so minutes from when we asked the question. I remember us saying goodbye to the board and putting it away. The 3 of us were talking about how impossible our ask was when 3:15 a.m. hit. We knew it hit 3:15 because the basement had a big grandfather clock that didn't ring anymore, but the clock function still worked. We were waiting, and right before the time changed to 3:16 a.m., it happened. The girl shot straight up out of her blankets and looked straight at the mirror with her eyes closed. She whispered what we asked her to say, then dropped to her pillow like nothing ever happened. Oh my God, that's so terrifying. We all just looked at each other, frozen. No other girl that was sleeping stirred. None of them moved, not one centimeter. We were so freaked out that we didn't sleep until the sun came up. And in October in the Midwest, that's pretty late. We got 3 hours of sleep tops that night. This was my first ever Ouija board experience, and that changed the way I view spirits forever. I still think about it and feel guilty that I basically asked one of my friends to be possessed. Needless to say, don't ever do that. That is so... oh my God. This is the second story by them, and I'm very curious to what it's about. Our second story comes in nearly a decade after the first. I was a senior in high school, and one of my cheermates invited the whole team over to celebrate her birthday. I didn't know it, but she had a Ouija board. She brought it out, and I said, nope, not a good idea. I guess her grandma had just died, and she was really torn up about it. I was very adamant that this wasn't a good idea and that we don't know if we were talking to would be her grandma or not. She promised she'd just try it twice and then she'd put it away. By this time, I knew a lot more than I did back during my first experience. I told her that she must say goodbye each time the girls rotated, and I had them put salt around the board to keep whatever they were talking to inside the board, and no one could get possessed. They tried it, and at least 4 times with different girls every time, and the planchette didn't move even once. They all laughed at me for how scared I acted earlier, saying that the board is stupid and doesn't really work. I got kind of annoyed because some of them knew about my experience. I had shared it to the few who were already hesitant about the board when it was brought out. I said, you know what, I'll do it, and I'll prove to everyone here that the boards are real. It was me, the birthday girl, who was a class below me, and 2 other girls from our class who only joined the team for our senior year. We put our fingers on the planchette and did the 3 circles to begin. I asked who we were talking to, and the planchette moved for the first time that night. The 2 girls in my class were huge skeptics. They said of course it would move when I just said, I'll prove it's real. They accused me of moving it. But the information that came out was information I never knew until they connected the dots for me. The board first goes to the letter J, then to the letter R. We were all confused because Junior isn't a name or a name of anyone we knew, or so we thought. We then asked why they were here, and the board spelled friend. We asked again who this is. The board spelled Junior. We were then asked what the J stands for, and the board spelled out Jonat. And one of the girls from my class screamed, "No way!" We all looked at her in confusion. She asked, "Is this Jonathan Ramon?" The planchette immediately moved to yes. The two girls sat so quietly and we just waited. The birthday girl asked who JR was, and the girls started to explain. JR was a guy who was in the class above me. I knew of him, but nothing about him personally. I had been cheering at our school all 4 years, so I knew him from the football team. That was all I knew of him. He had passed our sophomore year, his junior year, due to his car's exhaust. He didn't want to wake his parents after driving home from a party in the middle of winter, so he slept in his car with the car in the garage. His parents found him the next morning. I remember it totally ripped apart his class. I remember his friends not showing up to school for at least 2 weeks out of grief. We had a big celebration on the football field in spring. Back to the Ouija board situation. The two girls in my class were panicked. They looked at me weird. I said, well, it must be him coming through. They said no, that it's impossible because the board doesn't work and that it's making this all up and moving the planchette. They said I was a horrible person for impersonating JR. And I said I wasn't because I truly wasn't. I said, let's keep going and see what comes up. I knew they were friends of his and could validate the information that comes through. They reluctantly agreed and feverishly asked a few more questions. They asked what his football number was. The planchette moved to 2 numbers, and the two girls were in shock. I looked at them questioningly because, again, I didn't know this about him. It had been 2 years since he passed, and I had no idea what his number was. I couldn't even remember which number the assigned player I had a few months before had. Then they asked what color car he had. The board answered red, which was true. I at least remember the picture they had for his celebration was him in his red car because he loved the car. They then asked who his best friend was, and I definitely had zero idea who that would be. Again, we had similar friends. We were in the same places at the same time occasionally, but I never once spoke to this guy, and our mutuals didn't really talk to me about him because we really didn't have anything in common other than friends in the football cheerleader type of association. The board spelled out his best friend's name. The guy was the only guy in our school with the first name, but we asked for the last name just to see if it would spell it correctly, and it did. The girls didn't even say goodbye. They flung the board at me. They called me a liar, saying I made all this up. They were sobbing and screaming at me. It made me so uncomfortable. It was nothing but the tuner, the instrument which opened the veil for them, and they thought I was an awful person. The whole team fell silent, and I just left due to discomfort. Even though I had been captain of the team and had cheered with majority of the girls for at least 3 years, majority of them didn't talk to me, even at practice, for at least 2 weeks. So many of them thought I was either crazy or disgusting. Only a few of them understood that I wouldn't have known that based on who I was friends with at school and who I actually hung out with. JR and I truly never crossed paths for conversation until that night. If it was actually him, that is. I think it was, but I do know that spirits can pretend to be someone and read our thoughts/memories with them. I don't use Ouija boards anymore because you never know who you're going to get or who you're going to piss off, even if it works. Now I am practically energy reader and a medium, so all of this type of stuff in my life has taught me about how to further connect in a safe way behind the veil. Those are the most insane Ouija board stories I have ever read on this channel, I think. That's like so crazy. This is the last story, and I don't even know what this could be about, and it's from user brownie-bean. It's titled, I Saw Myself, True Story. I want to start by saying that I really want to believe the things I've seen or experienced were just my mind playing tricks on me, but it happened too often for me to dismiss it entirely. I was raised to believe that ghosts don't exist, but I also grew up hearing ghostly experiences from the same people who told me that. So I never truly dismissed the idea of ghosts. I just feel like we all share a space, and as long as we don't bother each other, it's fine. That said, I want to share the first very visible paranormal encounter I had. It was March 2015, and I had just finished my finals that day. After returning from school, I took a nap, felt refreshed, and around 7 p.m. there was a power cut. Power cuts are fairly common where I live, so I decided to pass the time by walking along the pathway leading to our garage, which was between our house and our garden. It was dark, but the moonlight provided enough visibility. I could see the road outside our property clearly. But where I was standing wasn't visible to anyone passing. Like a typical teenager, I stood there listening to music, doing random things. After a while, I was standing in front of the garage facing the road when I suddenly felt someone behind me. Before I could turn around, I sensed that this person was bending down towards my right side, and I could see a face behind my right elbow. I turned my head to look, and it was me. I was staring at myself, but the other me had this huge grin that I'll never forget. Honestly, I've tried to mimic it in front of mirrors, but I physically can't do it. I ran, or more like speed walked back to the house, unable to explain what I had just seen. It was just me and my mother at home at the time, and it wasn't even past 8 p.m. When I told her what happened, she joked that it might be one of the guys who got murdered on our property in the 1940s. Apparently, our property used to be a well-known garden open to the public, and according to one of my grandfather's friends, 3 murders had taken place in one day there, after which people stopped visiting the garden as much. After this incident, there were other small occurrences that I ignored. At one point, I stayed in the house alone for as long as 5 months. Even during those months, I would experience things randomly. I felt taps on my shoulder, heard clapping, and once I heard what sounded like whispers outside our living room window. That particular incident made me stay awake in the living room until dawn, fearing we were going to be robbed. I'm more scared of humans than ghostly beings. This is, like, the worst ever. These tiny occurrences didn't really bother any of my family members, but then something happened in early 2023. My grandmother, who has dementia, had moved in with us. We always had someone attending to her so she wouldn't wander off, which she had tried to do multiple times. Grandma had her own sofa in the living room, and she would only sit there. This sofa was visible from the dining room, which was connected to my room. So whenever I left my room, I would see her sitting on her sofa. One evening, I decided to take a nap in my room while my mom sat with my grandma. It was just the 3 of us at home. It was around 4 p.m. Everything was fairly bright. We still had our living room lights on. Instead of taking a nap, I was scrolling through my phone with my headphones on when my mom suddenly came running into my room. She frantically said something that I couldn't hear over my loud headphones. By the time I took them off, all I could hear was, "Help, Grandma!" And she ran out of the room toward the kitchen, trying to get to our backyard where my grandma was sitting on the floor. For some reason, she would always sit on the floor, and she was heavy enough that only my dad or I could lift her up. So I jumped out of bed and ran after my mom. But as I passed the living room, I saw my grandma sitting on the sofa. While running, I tried to ask my mom why she was heading to the backyard when Grandma was in the living room. But before I could finish my sentence, I stepped outside in the backyard and saw my grandma sitting on the floor. I stood still for a few seconds, confused as my mom struggled to lift her up. I eventually composed myself and helped her. That's when I realized that the grandma who was sitting on the sofa was wearing a different dress. I told my parents about this that very evening and also brought up what I had experienced back in 2015. That's when my mom mentioned that she too had experienced some unexplainable things. Nothing as visible as what I had seen, but she had felt things. Since that day, the activities had become more common occurrences. The creepiest one for me was when I felt as if someone was climbing onto my bed while I was on it. My bed was creaking in the same way it does when someone climbs onto it. I thought it could be my breathing, so I held my breath for 20 seconds and stayed still. The bed was still creaking. I freaked out, jumped out of bed, and turned on the lights, but as usual, there was nothing. When I got back into bed, the creaking stopped. My parents are usually very dismissive of the idea of ghosts, but even they have sensed things they can't explain. All we know is that whatever or whoever this might be isn't harmful. Still, I would like to believe that my mind is just making things up. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like this video, please comment, and please subscribe. It means the world to me. As always, stay spooky, guys.